So our next panel is called Representation in Photo Books. And I wanted to welcome our first panel. It's going to be moderated by Dr. Sally Stein. Sally, who is well known to our West Coast photo community, is a professor emeriti, having taught at the Department of Art History at UC Irvine. She's an independent photo scholar, photo historian, and cultural theorist based in Los Angeles. She's one of the big thinkers about the photographic image. She continues to research and write about 20th century photography in the United States and its relation to broader questions of culture and society. She has written about the New Deal FSA photographers, particularly Dorothea Lange, Marion Post-Walcott, and Jack Delano. Her numerous essays about popular mass media, such as the Ladies' Home Journal, Life and Look, extend her ongoing study of various aspects of the rise of color photography. The interrelated topics she most often engaged concern the multiple effects of documentary images, the politics of gender, and the status and meaning of black and white and color imagery on our perceptions. I want to thank Sally personally for stepping in as moderator when Dr. Deborah Willis was unable to make this trip out to California at the last minute. So thank you so much, Sally, for doing that. The idea of representation in photo books is a subject we don't always talk about or consider when we engage with the photo book. Who is or what is the photographer? What is the background? What are the interests? How have they engaged with the story they are trying to tell us through their narrative? Lots of questions. So welcome Sally Stein and panelists Pablo Ortiz Monestario and Ben Brody, who Sally will introduce. Thank you so much, Sally.
Yes.
Okay.
I want to thank Ken, also Leah, at the School of Journalism, the Logan family. I want to express regrets that Deborah Willis Thomas can't be here. Ken asked me, probably because he knew I had already signed up for the conference. So I'm really a cheap date. And I don't know what this doctor business is, because if anyone's having a medical crisis, I'm not equipped to deal with it. I do want to say that can you hear me? Sorry. When Ken sent me an email, hello, I have a favor to ask. I had been in New York, and I stayed with a friend who loves going to Broadway plays, which to me are too expensive and I don't go to. But she does. She saves every nickel to go to Broadway plays. And she was just telling me she'd gone to a play, and it was so disappointing because just after they sat down, there was an announcement on the theater mic. We're sorry to report that whatever actor, I don't remember what actor, is unavailable today, so it's an understudy, and there was a big groan in the house. So I met Kennedy actually on a long line going through security to fly back to LA, and I thought, oh shoot, I'm the understudy in this case. So I really wish Deborah were here. I was already planning on coming to hear all of you and to be part of the conversation. I'm now very pleased, well, to have the Southwest flight paid for and to get a free hotel room, but to introduce, to really have to be an active part of the conversation, especially following Sarah's great talk, which is really about, I loved her term, the mess, but also maybe we need to all be asking more questions, and Sarah's talk really exemplified that. So it's an honor to be on a panel to introduce both Pablo Monestario and Ben Brody. I'm going to introduce them individually, starting with Pablo Monestario, whom probably many of you already know. Born in '52 in Mexico City, studied economics in Mexico, and later on photography in England from '94 to '97. In those years, he published in the British Journal of Photography and Creative Camera. From '78 to '85, he taught photography at UAM, or the Autonomous University of Mexico in Mexico City. From '79 to '82, this is really breathless because we need to get on to the talks. He coordinated, and it's a very long intro because he's done so much. He coordinated a collection of 7 books, Mexico Indígena, Indigenous Mexico. In 1983, he started the collection Rio de Luz, consisting of 20 volumes of Latin American photographers. In 86, the collection was awarded by ICP in New York, a major prize. In 93 to 98, he directed and edited a quarterly devoted to photography, Luna Cornea, published by the Centro de la Imagen, Mexico. Of 21, I wanted to, no, this is, excuse me, we're supposed to go back to, this is the wrong image. I hadn't looked up, sorry. I was trying to go fast, so we have lots of time. Of 21, yes, this is the amazing picture I wanted to show. Of 21 published books, there's 1982's Los Pueblos del Viento, People of the Wind, I&I, Testigos y Cómplices, Witnesses and Accomplices, MC Editors. 1992, The Corazón de Venado, Deerheart, Casa de la Imagen. 1996, La Última Ciudad, also from Casa de la Imagen. The Last City, Twin Palms published it here in America. Many of you probably cherish it in your libraries. The book was chosen by the American Institute of Graphic Arts as one of the best 50 books of '96. Also received L'Oeil d'Or, or Golden Eye, in the Festival of Three Continents in Nantes, France, and the award for the best photographic book, Primavera Fotografica Barcelona, in 1997. In 2010, Montana Blanca, White Mountains, and in 2016, and I'm going to mess the pronunciation, Desaparecido, or The Disappeared with a question mark, where have they gone, which was published by Nazreli. Please join me in welcoming Pablo Ortiz Monestario.
So thank you very much for having me here. I want to thank the organization. I'm nervous, but I'm really proud to be addressing you this morning. So I've been doing books most of my life. I've been lucky because I have not only done my books, but have done many other people's books. So by now that I have the feeling that I am beginning to know really how to do a good book. You know, how to, it has taken me some years, and probably I have ruined the career of many of my dear friends. It wasn't my intention. But now that I look back and how the books have aged, I realize that some books are really interesting, have aged properly. Some others, not so much. I'm going to talk about the Mexico City book and some strategies I had then. This was shot. It was a very long-term project, 10 years, in which, you know, nobody hired me, and it was a difficult project to do because how do you photograph a city that when I started, in comparison to how I finished, there were 3 more million people. It keeps changing all the time. All the time. Everything changes. Everything moves. And yes, my intention was like, at the beginning, okay, I'm a photographer, I have a camera, I'm going to go out there and try to explain what is Mexico City, what happens. I didn't know exactly how do you start? What's the idea? Yes, you go to. So I decided that I was going to send my body to go everywhere. With a map, I will trace directions and have my body experience the whole city. Because although I'm from there and have lived most of my life there, I didn't know most of the city because you don't need to go to all those areas. You know, maybe I have passed through some of them, but that's all. So I pushed my body with a camera with the intention of, okay, what kind of messages, what kind what this body brought back, and try to read on my reactions with the intention of what the book should be about. I worked for 10 years, and the book has a bit more than 40 pictures. So how do you translate all those experiences into this book? Why making a book? Well, I think books are fascinating because they're an antique platform. They're very old. We've been doing books for thousands of years in human beings. And now these modern languages, visual languages, that we apply into this antique platform, it creates a very interesting formula, and also that they're very democratic. You don't have to go to New York to the MoMA to see the show, but eventually, I don't know for what reasons, but the book comes up to you, and you can see it without plugging in anything, just light, and you go through. So those characteristics I find fascinating about books. So when I started doing this project, I was doing a book. I knew from the beginning that the project, I did shows and other stuff, but the main project was the book. So composition, I was thinking the double pages all the time because it was going to be a book. By then, I had already been an editor and had made lots of books. So the strategy in terms of composing was already there. That I'd say, okay, you have the gutter. I like double pages. The idea of the double pages, it wasn't just to fill out the white space. It was that if you leave like in one page and white around, it's easier to see the photograph and to evaluate if it's properly composed. When you do a double page and it's bleed, boom, it jumps up to you. And you end up understanding what's in the picture instead of evaluating if it's good or bad. And I was very interested in that. My interest was the city and not me showing that I was a fairly good photographer. So it took me literally years to understand that I was not describing the city. That wasn't my project. My project ended up, and this is important because it was from there that I edited. I feel it's very key element to be positioned in where is it that you're looking at? From where are you looking that work? The same thing that you do when you photograph, also when you edit. So when I understood that my goal wasn't to show Mexico City, then by being liberated of that, I didn't have to have the important buildings and the parks and all these things. No, my project was what can happen to you if you walk around the streets? What kind of experience can you have? And definitely the energy, and although conditions, material conditions are very harsh, it's a poor country and there are millions of poor people in that city. By now I think we're around 20 million. So, and even though the situation is difficult, the energy and the joy and we have a word in Spanish, relajo, that it's, this kind of attitude that portrays, that was very important. So once I knew this, obviously this picture, Low Flying is called, was a key element in the book because this portrays that energy, this portrays that relajo, and it also shows the strategy of composing because, there were two elements. I was, doing a book, and maybe this might be a spread, but also, in a city like that, there are so many events happening at the same time. I felt the need, with the limitation of a still photography, black and white, I felt the need of always, this interests me, what can I compose it with to make it more complex, to slightly suggest the complexity of that city. So I kept, finding from here to there, what else can I put to this element? And obviously, it's the boy jumping the main element. And it works well for the page to have it in the left side, but to have it with the gun and the Sex Pistols then gives context, and then the reading becomes more complex. The same again, with police and this family walking, and the man is carrying this, it's corn actually, inside the costal. So, yes, I saw these guys practicing bullfighting. And, but obviously what I needed was to put it in the urban context. And that was the periférico. And I was driving, and I saw these guys, and it was starting to rain, and I simply, you don't do this in this country, but we take a little bit chaotic city, so I jump into that where people walk in the side street, and run down, took 3 shots, and then came back, and I really like this picture, because I like the cars, I like the humidity, friendship, and again, in that dust and the tires in the floor, and I know we have little time, so I'm going to go very fast. Sometimes I would use 2 vertical shots, and because I wanted to have full bleed again, and I was working with 35 millimeter, film, I had to crop these vertical images. I didn't care. I was not longer worried about the full frame religion, that you have to show even the black thread. I was interested in the city, and luckily I had left behind these things that, Cartier-Bresson, Cult had produced when we were young. And so yes, violence that now you hear so much from Mexico, it didn't start the day before. It's been going on for long, and I have this anecdote of this boy, because I was carrying a camera, and I saw him with the camera. Actually, I have 2 pictures of him. And so I put the camera to take his portrait, and he goes like this, and if you shoot, I shoot. So I shoot immediately. No. So books, it's very important, this, I believe. It's very important, the structure, the rhythm. You have, in books, in literature, they call it chapters. I prefer to use movements to borrow it from music that has, the piece has certain movements, and this is a 100-page book, more or less, so it has 3 movements. And how do you mark that? So there is only 3 times in the book there is a left page that is black again. I was lucky to be published by Twin Palms. At the time they were printing in Japan, in Kyoto, photogravure, that it's, at times I have thought that is the book, really. It's not my work, it's not all these 10 years of, no. It's the printing in photogravure that it's done so wonderful. And so the feel of it, and the texture, and how the light reflects, because it's a really matte paper, and how it works, that is also a key element. It's a rather small, so you can hold it very easily. I can go through it in seconds, and I see it again, and then I go in the other direction. So the architecture in terms of size. It's a hardcover, which is, it's very sturdy. It would last more than me, that's for sure. That, I am definitely privileged to have been published by Twin Palms. So also, festivities are an important part of what happens in that city, so it has a part, and definitely festivities are linked to religion, always in Mexico. So, the Easter festivity, it's so enormous. It's so many different places that happens. So obviously in those days, television runs these religious films about Jesus Christ, and like the photograph in the left, it's reversed. It was, and I simply put it, again, it works better if these two ladies kind of suggest you as a reader that they are paying attention or if they are looking in the direction into the television. So I said, I'll do it, We didn't have Photoshop, and there was a sign there letting you know that is reversed. So I simply lightened that part so you couldn't read it, but it was more important to have this idea of relating the images and creating not necessarily ideas, but yes, feelings and sensations, and eventually that constructs ideas. So this is the same boy. He's twice in the book. Wow. But I've heard that afternoon that, he shot that rifle, so when he threatened me. And this was an Easter celebration where they do real life representations, and and part of it that he has to suffer a lot and being beaten a lot, and it's part of the realistic thing. So they're very, very impressive. So I mix these with everyday situations, that the Jesus Christ lying there, and then the boy that had fell, was to mix the condition of people living in Mexico. And then at the end, I use this kind of death and Jesus Christ and religious thing to finish the book. Last week it was Easter, and I went to this place, and 25 years later, the celebration has gotten bigger, kinkier, and absolutely crazy. It's a very poor area of the city, but it's still very much alive. So this is Mexico City. Now I want to talk of strange projects to somehow. This is a book that is very dear to me because I did with my father. He was a very distinguished plastic surgeon. So at one point when I was studying in London, he said, you should finish this, come back to Mexico, whatever, but I want you to do this. Gaspar Italiacozzi, he was a 16th century surgeon, the father of plastic surgery, invented, the beginning of surgery. So how do you document, how do you show the life of someone that lived 500 years ago? So here you have my father next to Tagliacozzi statue in Bologna. So this is, yes, a landscape from the distance. You don't feel that much the modern city that nowadays is Bologna. So the territory were some sculptures that they have, and books and stones, basically. That is the territory I was documenting, trying to find the life of Gaspar Italiacozzi. So he was in the academy, he was a doctor, and at the time you could only study philosophy or law. This is 16th century. Already the university was 500 years old in Bologna, one of the oldest, I think the oldest university in Europe. And the doctors, they would do the teriaco, that was this only one medicine, and that was part of the job. And at the time, they were studying anatomy, and they were opening the body to see how we were made inside. So through that, this is the city. In the city, there is this book that my father gave me, that it's the history of this man, forgot the author, but anyway, an American historian, very important, that did Life and Times of Gaspari Tagliacozzi, very detailed, like there were 3,000 beggars in the city at the time. So I knew that. So when I saw this carving in stone, this is an element that I can use. No? Obviously, the paper and the illustrations of landscapes, so the city, and try to recreate. And that's him, Tagliacozzi, with his book. We know of him because he did this very important book that it has become an absolute classic. So this is what he did. You know, people had accidents in their face, and he would reconstruct noses. He saw this at the time. The barbers were the surgeons, were the ones who, and the doctors were there studying anatomy. And because they were good with the scalps, he saw the operation that was designed probably in the 10th century in India. He saw them in Calabria and said, I couldn't do it better. So he started doing these operations. And basically what it is it opens 3 sides, like you see there. You have no nose, no anesthetic, and that is why it's called pain and beauty, because you have to stand, that people will cut here and will cut whatever to have the 2 places raw. So he will fix it like that, and after 40 days, he will cut the link to the arm, and with that new skin that is there, will construct a new nose. So how do you say pain? That was my 5 minutes, wow. How do you say pain? So, you know, what I found was certain gestures of faces and also the scalps. They were, with that, they would cut. It wasn't knives like we know them today. And he would also do lips and ears. And again, pain, you know. This as close as I could get. And that's Tagliacozzi. So this is another case, Academ Gorodok. So I was invited to go to Russia in 2014 to photograph whatever I wanted. For 10 days, they will fly me out there. So I was going to do shamans in Siberia. And when I got there after 38 hours of flying, there was no car to go, and we had to drive, no car. So they took me, while they got the car, they took me to see this nuclear physics lab that was there. And the next day, the car wasn't there, but I was really interested in this nuclear physics lab. So I decided, I do this. We don't go to the shamans. And because, you know, they didn't want me to do this because they preferred. But anyway, they didn't have the car, so they allowed me to do this. And so I was not prepared. I didn't know what they did that, and I understood very little. My science in terms of nuclear physics is very, very limited. And so I basically photographed that blind. I couldn't understand, what are these? Why are they painted in those colors? I mean, there must be. So I was looking suprematism. You know, I was very impressed with the palette. In Mexico, it can be colorful. I wasn't expecting Russia to be particularly colorful, but that lab definitely was. So it was inaugurated by Nikita Khrushchev in the 50s, and 30,000 scientists moved there. And by the time I went there, there were 60,000. 2 minutes. Scientists working there. So the point is, this work, I knew that the machine, the camera was recording precisely everything. And I was not reading or seeing properly all the layers that were there. So when I came back, and then this other part of constructing the book, so the body went there and clack, 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 registered. And then the constructing of the book, I mean, can you do a fairly good book in 10 days? I'm not sure. But anyway, this is so strange. Never had a camera gone in and come out, because that you didn't do. It was, Soviet Union. And so it was, the scientists there were very worried and they're not used to it. But so there was a novelty to this. Nobody had seen the insides of this, and that's why a book might be interesting, because it's not the way it's photographed, it's that has never been photographed. So I used this, what I call these organic breaks, because basically there were huge rooms with no people and these weird machines. So to avoid having this like a catalog of machines, colorful machines, every now and then I had these organic breaks. That fish was part of it. That was, someone had it there and I photographed it. And this is a second one. And I did this organic breaks. And this is particularly tricky, because it's about atomic investigation and everything. And suddenly you see a girl inside this bubble in this murky water. So you said, what? I am pushing the reader to think, are they using her for their research? I mean, obviously not. And this is the only picture that is not taken inside the laboratory. It was in the city, in a park. But and I'm taking these liberties in terms of to call the attention of the viewer, and I have to finish immediately. I have this other book that we'll talk in the conversation later on.
You'll show us a little bit.
A little bit.
I want to find out how you deal with the disappeared.
So the idea for showing this book is the architecture of the book. This I published with Nasreli Press, and it's about the 43 students that disappeared. My last 3 books have been quite political, so it's cost us $1 to produce each one. It's printed really badly in the worst paper, the cheapest paper, and it looks beautiful. I mean, it works properly for what it is. I love the Última Ciudad and the gravure printing, but for these, it's 4 inks and bad paper, and it all got so the idea of these students that were disappeared. How can you disappear 43? So the strategy here, I started going to the manifestations and all the meetings and all the things and people, we were very ashamed, we were very angry. And yes, the photographs of those events were people shouting, and there was one that was 1 million people in Mexico City related to that. But when I saw the pictures, they were, another of these manifestations. So I decided to have a different strategy. So I started thinking in words. And, anger, fear, shame, death, certain words. And with those words that I had written in big, I went through my archive. So there are photographs that I took in a museum in Italy. And the photograph, maybe I have it here. This one. So there is paint there, so it's helpful. And by using calligraphy on top of the image, I would bring the Venetian Museum to Ayotzinapa, by putting the 43. So I used a different strategy to convey the idea of pain, shame. Thank you so much.
I'm sure we could all ask more about all of these books, and especially the last one, the 43 disappeared. I also want to say I happen to have heard excellent podcasts on Reveal about this terrible violence against the 43 students. So if anyone wants to know a little more on the ongoing investigations that also sometimes were stopped, suppressed, you can go to Reveal and look this up as well. It's my pleasure also now to introduce Ben Brody, an independent photographer, educator, and picture editor working on long-form projects related to the American wars in Iraq and Afghanistan after earning a Bronze Star for his service as a U.S. Army photographer in 2008. In 2012, he earned a BA in journalism from UMass Amherst, and in 2017, he earned an MFA from the Hartford Art School. Among his print and book publications are his essay of work from Afghanistan in New Press's 2013, A People's History of Counterinsurgency, edited by Hannah Gurman. His first artist book in 2016, Can We Get a War Thread Going?, was published by Wolf Hill Press, and then from the same press in 2017, Endgame Afghanistan, followed in 2019 by Attention Service Member from Red Hook Editions that was shortlisted for the 2019 Aperture Perry Photo Book Award. Reprinted in 2020 as a second edition by Mass Books, which he co-founded that year. In 2022, he also published his newest volume, 300 Meters, or 300M. I had to ask him, M, is that for meters? And he answered yes. An accordion book with Mass Books that offers a panoramic, in literal terms also, journey through the height of the American war in Afghanistan, framed in the context of the fall of Kabul and the ties that remain with friends and colleagues who currently live under Taliban rule. Since 2019, he served as director of photography of the Ground Truth Project and Report for America, making his base in Western Massachusetts while exhibiting his own work and lecturing widely from Amherst and Yale in New England to the Virginia Military Institute and now here in Berkeley. Please join me in welcoming Ben Brody.
Hi, everyone. So I want to talk to you today about my work representing the 20-year war known as the Global War on Terror. You'll probably hear me abbreviate it as the GWAT. I worked for 15 years, most of my adult life, covering these wars at the intersection of photojournalism and art and propaganda, which I'll take you through. I've broken this up into some chapters. Each chapter break is handled with a selfie. So here's the first one. So during the run-up to the Iraq War, in 2002, I was already really interested in photography, and I sort of cut my teeth looking at the photography representation of the Vietnam War, Philip Jones Griffiths in particular. And I wanted to do that myself. But as a 21-year-old, I had no money to, fly to Turkey and take a taxi to Baghdad and hope for the best. I had no connections or experience in photojournalism where I could get one of these so-called military embeds where you just ride along with the soldiers and they take you to where the pictures are. So I joined the Army as a combat photographer. So my job was to represent the war in Iraq in a very specific way. So this is probably my best like propaganda picture. Very cinematic, very Apocalypse Now. If you go to Fort Campbell, Kentucky, where, the home unit of this soldier is, you'll see this picture like plastered all over the wall. This is the way I was expected to represent the war. These are, soldiers raiding a car bomb factory. So, soldiers being powerful in command and marching towards victory. And that's what I did. I spent almost 6 years in the Army, about 27 months of that photographing in Iraq, where I had pretty much free access to the battlefield. And these are the kinds of products that we made. These are sort of my first photo books. The Warrior, send me. You can see this picture is meant to show that the Iraqi police officer is on point, taking charge of operations in Iraq, where we'll be able to get out of there and let the freedom and justice flourish on their own, which obviously is not what happened. So after my first enlistment, I got out. I did not re-enlist, and I went to Afghanistan as a civilian photojournalist. My work from Iraq that I just showed you, I sort of picked my 10 best pictures, used that as a portfolio to get assignments in Afghanistan, and really never revisited that work. I never looked at it again because, pretty quickly I felt like I was making stronger work in Afghanistan. I was making work on my own terms. For about 2 or 3 years, sort of during the height of the surge in Afghanistan, these are the kinds of pictures I would make. So very much sort of in dialogue with the photojournalism you'd see in national news outlets, which is sort of who I was shooting for. And I was trying to make work that would meet the expectations of the editors who would hire me. I did find that I had access to people and places that I did not have as a soldier. So, for example, as a civilian, I could go photograph a Taliban security chief in Mazar-e Sharif, which is, obviously something I couldn't have done as a soldier. I started thinking about representation of the military in terms of how do soldiers represent themselves? How do they want to be represented? What is this sort of feedback loop of visual information that they find themselves caught in, where photojournalists document war and then video games and Hollywood turn it into something else, and then soldiers want to, sort of ape that and, take it to its absurd extreme. Obviously here we have this young private first class, pretending to be Rambo. But I didn't set this picture up. This is how he wanted to be photographed in the portrait. Trying to photograph these ideas about why do people want to go fight? So these are, 3 privates after their first firefight, which is a huge rite of passage in the military. And I've seen this scene, probably 20 times in 15 years at war. But, this was the only time it happened with a beautiful sunset and mountains in the background. This approach, I'm sorry, I'm going through these really fast. This sort of traditional photojournalistic approach to taking these pictures, I eventually found unsatisfying or sort of too thin for some of the same reasons that I found my, military propaganda photography unsatisfying in some ways, and not documenting what I felt to be, the sort of dark comedic heart of the war. So I had a really sort of blow my mind open conversation with a photographer named Edmund Clark, who has made amazing photo books. and I just randomly encountered him at Bagram Airfield, which is this humongous air base in eastern Afghanistan, where, you know, the photojournalists like me go out and, you know, you sort of gather up there, you get your assignment, and then you go out and do tough guy stuff in the mountains, you know, hiking around and seeing where it's really violent. So, you know, I was comparing like what I was doing with Edmund. He was like, yeah, I'm actually not leaving the base. It's like, what are you talking about? He's like, no, I actually find, like, you know, these things you're talking about like propaganda and censorship and self-censorship, like, you can't actually defeat them doing what you're trying to do, you know, going out and taking pictures of people shooting at each other. If you just sort of stay on the base and photograph, like, the theatrics and the, you know, foundations of this, you know, absurd narrative, it can actually be a more revealing strategy. So that, you know, really did something for me. And, you know, I started incorporating text into my pictures, trying to document the war in unexpected ways, soldiers shopping for jewelry at Kandahar Airfield. And I actually found some of these pictures that functioned in that way back in my archives. Like, this was actually my first day in Afghanistan, which was July 4th, 2009. I wish I could tell you what that penguin is doing on the podium. I have no idea. You know, trying to make pictures that asked more questions than answered them. And part of that was getting away from the daily or weekly photojournalism assignments that I had started out doing, and doing more grant-funded work. So sort of going back to finding a client who will pay you to do things your way. So there was really no going back from doing grant-funded work and, you know, finding clients like the Ground Truth Project who are interested in how I saw Afghanistan. But at the same time, this work was published in these very ephemeral ways. It was on websites, it was on, you know, news organizations that became defunct. It was on, like, blogs that don't exist anymore. Even the stuff that was in print, like, you know, the Warrior, like, that was a print publication, but yeah, there are not too many of those still that are objects that exist in the world. So, oh yeah, we spent like $250,000 making this interactive website called Forever Stan that was done in Flash. Yeah, that's gone now. You can't see it anymore. So that sort of ephemeral nature of, you know, how my work was seen really weighed on me. And, you know, now we're at another chapter break, after 13 years of photographing on the battlefield, I was pretty smoked. I'd been blown up quite a few times and hit in the head plenty of times and had chronic pain. And I felt like I needed to reevaluate my relationship to photography and make something that satisfied myself. So on a lark, I applied to an MFA program. I think I may be the only Iraq veteran who has used his GI Bill to get an MFA in photography. Yeah, so I went to art school. I went to Hartford Art School, which is a limited residency program. And, you know, coming off of like 13 years on the battlefield, it was a pretty alien environment for me going to school. I did do my undergrad at UMass, but after one semester in the journalism school, I convinced them that I was going to move to Afghanistan. They were going to keep me on as a full-time student. I was going to graduate on time. That's how it was going to be. And I think the teachers were happy to get me out of the classroom. So anyway, to keep myself sane in the program, I like photographed the program itself in like this really judgmental way. Don't get me wrong, I got a lot out of the program. I loved it. I loved all my friends. But I secretly made this photo book and printed like 20 of them and gave it to everybody at graduation, like without telling anybody what I was doing. Yeah. But going to art school did help me reevaluate reevaluate my relationship with photography. I was, looking for information about lithium batteries or something, and I encountered this picture being used in an ad. So I reverse Google image searched it and found that this image has actually been used in all kinds of places, put in dialogue with anime, with video games. Can we get a war thread going, like put in dialogue with all this like unintentional poetry. Being in art school, like it was an opportunity. Like I could just make a little book out of this. I could make a little project. Ultimately, I felt like this book is a bit one-dimensional. But talk about a photo book that you make in 10 days. I made this in 3 days from when I first found the picture, printed it on inkjet, took it to the copy shop, had it coil bound, book. But, some of these screenshots made it into Attention Service Member, which was my first book. This is another book. There's one copy of it. I've got it outside if you want to see it. These are pictures that I found randomly scraping veterans and soldiers' publicly available Facebook pages. And I just screenshotted them and made a really cheap, perfect bound blurb book out of them. So thinking about these ideas about how are soldiers represented by photojournalists, how are they represented by artists, how do they represent themselves? But I needed to do something for my MFA program besides taking screenshots and making photo books. What I eventually came up with was just an elevator pitch that was, all right, so I went off to war for 13 years. I came back, the entire world looked different. The beautiful place I live in, Western Massachusetts, my loved ones, everything I saw was tinged with this sort of film of menace and dread. So I decided to photograph what that looks like. And that seemed like a good project for an MFA program. The truth of this picture is, this is my niece and her dad dancing at a wedding, having a wonderful time. Let's update the software right now. Yeah. Good catch, Apple. Yeah. The truth of this picture, my niece and her cousin horsing around. But that's not how the pictures read, obviously. My wife and I dancing at a wedding, having an awesome time. Ultimately, I also felt like this work on its own was a bit one-dimensional. It didn't do everything I wanted it to do. And I wasn't really sure where to go with it. But, being in art school really helped me reevaluate the criteria by which I judged photographs. And on a lark, I pulled my hard drive from Iraq out of the closet, which I hadn't looked at in, 10 years. Somehow I took all my pictures that I took in Iraq home with me, not just the ones that were sort of useful for, propaganda purposes. And I found some things in there that, my 2007 brain did not recognize as interesting pictures. And, maybe having so much distance that I don't even remember taking a lot of these pictures, helped me look at them with fresh and less judgmental eyes. And once I found this body of work that I wasn't really even aware that I had, I felt like I had the makings of a photo book for the first time. That these pictures with the, sort of classically propagandistic pictures with my, photojournalism, with the black and white images from home, with the screenshots, that I could all just sort of mash them up into one monstrosity that would give people an experience of how chaotic and strange and absurd and cruel and banal the wars really were, in a way that taking one of those single approaches was never really satisfying for me. And, you know, to mash all that stuff together, I felt like I needed a really punk designer. Oh yeah. And the title came from this postcard that I got like 6 or 8 months I've gotten out of the Army, with this absurd threat that if I failed to respond to this postcard, it could result in my discharge. I'd been discharged. I had a beard at this point. So, you know, that was just something I always kept in my back pocket. Sally, how are we doing on time? We're good. Cool. Cool. Thanks, Catherine. Thinking about, you know, how to structure this as a book. I often, I read a ton of fiction. Actually don't read enough. For a journalist, I read a shockingly little amount of nonfiction. So I was looking for some books that had a narrative structure that really worked for me, that I felt like had a lot to offer. So the big one for me was Slaughterhouse-Five by Kurt Vonnegut. The literary device that Vonnegut uses to convey the experience of post-traumatic stress disorder is that the protagonist becomes unstuck in time. So Billy Pilgrim is involuntarily time traveling between being a prisoner of war during the firebombing of Dresden, his childhood, his adulthood trying to make a living as an optometrist, and the future where he's been kidnapped by aliens and is being shown in a zoo on another planet. And so I thought, how could I translate that literary device into the medium of a photo book? You know, it can't just be chaos. All these pictures are pretty chaotic. It was, you know, a book this big that's just chaos, you're never gonna get through it. So where is sort of the linear piece that is going to run through it, that'll give it some structure? And Murakami's 1Q84 helped give me something of an answer with that. This idea of there being two moons that only a handful of people can see. That it's this alternate timeline that some people live in and other people don't. And that helped me, that sort of was the spark for writing about 8,000 words of text that run through Attention Service Member. So while it's organized with the black and white pictures in the beginning on this sort of nice glossy paper that you would, you know, it's pretty typical photo book paper, you know, Munkin 160 or something, to the color pictures that are on this sort of rough, uncoated paper and are edited in this sort of rather kaleidoscopic and chaotic way with no captions. And the black and white pictures appear again at the end of the book in another sequence. Well, running through this whole book are 4 or 5 inserts of text. And the text references, rather than having captions, the text references a number of pictures. Some of the pictures you've already encountered, some of the pictures you'll encounter later, thus moving you forward and backward through the book. So that was how I sort of adapted some of the ideas that I found in novels into making the narrative structure around the book. Looking at, you know, making a GWAT photo book in 2019 meant that I had literally 75 photo books about this subject to look at, like Christoph Bangert's War Porn, which is a really important book about censorship and self-censorship, but it's also a really gruesome book that is really difficult to look at. How could I talk about these things in a way that you might actually want to pick up this book more than once? Tim Hetherington's Infidel, brilliant, beautiful book that you know, has this really sort of central theme of this bond of brotherhood that is created in these you know, intense combat environments that I found to be that wasn't my experience at all. In Iraq, soldiers were dying like flies. I didn't want any friends. And, so how could I respond to that in a photo book? Vietnam Inc., obviously. And then, photo books like made by other photographers that, had these sort of tropes in them, like, it's okay to show Iraqi or Afghan people in pain, but it's not okay to show American people in pain. These kinds of like corrosive narratives that had shot through the global war on terror in an insidious way that I also wanted to, if not confront, at least avoid. So yeah, then came the process of making a bunch of 4x6 prints, tacking them on the wall, and seeing what I got. So yeah, I worked with Red Hook Editions, which is, at that time was basically a self-publishing plus. So here I'm working with Glenna Gordon and Peter Van Agtmael, helping me sort of sequence and helping me navigate the process of making a photo book once I really sort of understood what I wanted to do. Showing it to my friends. This is Nick Nichols. He's like the National Geographic photographer. And then I pitched a bunch of designers, and the designer I really clicked with the most was Jeroen Kummer in the Netherlands, and he and Max Walbers, to his right, came up with the design for Service Member. And this I really felt like was going to be my last word on the GWAT. I felt like I had said what I wanted to say and was moving on until a year and a half ago, during the fall of Kabul, when my friends and colleagues were trapped in Afghanistan and needed a way out. I was in the U.S., but, having spent 7 years in Afghanistan, it's like, yeah, I got a lot of friends who are like scary CAG operators and mercenaries and, people who can get things done, basically, and contacts at the State Department. So, this is just sort of a collection of the like visual information that was coming at me. And my friends and other veteran and journalist friends and I collaborated to share information with each other, to try and get our friends out through the airport, which I'm sure you all saw the visual imagery of what that was like. And we had some successes, and some of our friends are still in Afghanistan. This is another just sort of like Taliban propaganda, like, the obviously mocking the Joe Rosenthal picture from Iwo Jima, raising the flag, and then like a meme that people were making, with Taliban like dressing up like Navy SEALs. But that made me think I had one more book in me, and I know we're running out of time. I'll go really quick. So I had this body of work from 2011 during the opium poppy harvest in Kandahar, and I had made these pictures with a toy camera. So I should have brought it with me because it's like pretty tactile and physical. Anyway, you pull a string out and you let it go, and it spins around in a 360. I brought this camera to Afghanistan kind of as an icebreaker, like, I'm cool. I'm not like some scary journalist. I'm just hanging out. And I didn't ever have like any intention of doing anything with the pictures. So when it came time to develop them, I did a really bad job. I got like air bubbles trapped against them. And, I made some okay scans of them and sort of put them in the drawer for a while. But thinking about like how I could draw a line between like everything an attention service member is made from this sort of position of strength, where I had control over what was going on. Whereas everything in 300 meters, this is the opium poppy harvest in Kandahar. Like, yeah, there are soldiers around, but they can't do anything. Like, the Taliban own this ground. And obviously, again, with the fall of Kabul. So sort of putting those two experiences that were 10 years apart together into one book. The text under the cover is an excerpt from a WhatsApp chat between me and my colleagues in Afghanistan. And then we came up with an accordion design for that we felt like served these panoramic pictures pretty well. So yeah, it's 16 feet long, all told. You can flip through it like a photo book. I like, like Pablo, I like making books that you can hold close, that you can have sort of an intimate, like tactile relationship. But, if you have a stage or a big studio space, you can stretch it out on the floor and really see what's up. Yeah, so this was like checking the color of the cover against a poppy. And I actually checked the color of the cardboard on Attention Service Member with the cardboard that comes in a MRE package, which are the like really crappy meals that soldiers eat. That is what I got for you. I hope I made time. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
So how long will be?
I'd say 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Or else you can do this like, whatever. Does this work? Oh, okay. We're going to keep this shorter than was originally planned so that you and we have time for some lunch before the afternoon because, an army marches on its stomach. And hopefully you'll do better than MREs today. I actually thought the red was the color of blood, but now I understand better that it was intended to match with a poppy.
You learn some. Oh, whoa. Yeah, you learn something new, every time you show your work to somebody.
I still don't understand 300M.
Oh yeah, I didn't explain that. Wow. Okay.
You are protecting.
Okay. So 300 meters is the distance from Hamid Karzai International Airport that it got serious about having to synthesize intelligence in order to make tactical decisions about moving our people through. So every meter from 300 to 0, 0 being the airport gate, was agonized and scrutinized over.
Thank you. And I wanted to ask you, Pablo, a question about, you said there's thousands of years of books, or did I misunderstand that? And I actually thought that's much longer than I thought was the history of the book. I thought the book actually starts around the time of the medical treatise that you presented in Grief and Beauty or Suffering and Beauty. But I guess I want to ask both of you, has the book with photography changed our thinking about books greatly with photography? And where do you see it going today when everything seems to be going to ebook? What do we lose? What might we gain with this new movements away from what we think of as the traditional handheld book?
First, I answered these thousands of years of books. The pre-Hispanic codices are books. So yes, there weren't yet thousands of books, and that happened in the Renaissance. But the book object, when we discovered, when we invented the thing, it's already thousands of years. And then with the more.
And then more generally, I want to ask you about one, how do you see photography as changing the book? And then how is the book changing today? And how do you want to maybe fight that with continuing to make traditional books or thinking anew about the issue of the book in the electronic era.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I definitely don't see like e-readers as a threat to photo books. I mean, print books, absolutely. Like, I love my Kindle, like for text books. But I mean, for photo books, you know, photographs just render completely differently on a screen, and an e-reader is like nonsense. And B, like the tactile, you know, manner in which you hold a book that has a lot to do with its binding and its like paper types has a tremendous amount to offer in terms of the experience of looking at a photo books. And C, it's like, you know, best case scenario, what are you printing, like 1,500 books? Why would you let anyone tell you what to do? Like, you know, this isn't like you got to print 50,000 books that are coming out and it's like own ocean liner and you got to deal with the realities of the commodity market. It's like, yeah, it's 3 pallets. Come on.
So for limited editions, it's still DIY is the best approach.
I fully agree that the object itself and how do you see it and how the movements of your hands and your eyes and how it goes is a completely different experience than the screen. And then there is this prestigious thing about books that, you know, you have a book. People, when they see themselves in the book, you know, and usually, even if it's a tough image, usually are very happy and they feel some kind of proud. So this heritage we use to reach audiences in a proper way. And I slightly disagree with 1,500 books. You can do whatever. No, you know, there are so many photo books now, and the competition is so fierce that how can I, and that is the constant fight, that how can I do books and images and construct a document that is absolutely moving and that, you know, these small audiences, yes, they are small, but how can I call their attention? How is it the way people are perceiving and understanding photo books and how that influenced me to take the decisions I'm doing for the books of tomorrow? So in a way, you know, yes, I do what I believe is best, but I'm paying attention to who is the audience, how can I address and understand what we all need.
Yeah. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah. A lot of thought went into like the audience of the book and what I'm going to do with it for them. Yeah.
We can tell.
Yeah.
Yes. I actually telegraphed to each of you using email, not telegraphy. I wanted to know, was there a particular book or small handful of books that were both a positive inspiration for getting going with the book, and also if there were some books, if you want to name them, that were negative models, like, no, I don't want to do that at all, but it actually was provocative in terms of getting you going. So I ask you first, and then you, Ben, and then we're going to open it up.
When I decided to become a serious photographer, Kudelka's Gypsies just came out. It was the edition that Bill did, and it was like the Robert Frank that you just saw, classic, you know, in the right page, the photograph with white around. And I thought that book was absolutely wonderful. I remember being in London, the photographer's gallery, looking at it and being very excited. And that has remained with me until I saw the version Kudelka did himself. So he waited maybe 30 years to do his version because he respected. He was so grateful with Del Pire that when he died, then he felt liberated and did the new version of the Gypsies that is an absolute beauty. So that definitely is among the books that I very much like. And then there is another book by Manuel Alvarez Bravo that he's our great master. And he did in 1940 when he was accepted to the Academy of Arts in Mexico, they published this book printed in Mexico in the 40s, not necessarily good printing. 100 editions, 100 issues of that had four silver gelatin prints attached to them. And that book now it's, I think, $100,000. It's a very unique. I don't have that copy, but I have the one that doesn't have the prints. And it's a wonderful piece because it somehow links the 19th century with a deep and strong modernity that Don Manuel had in the 20s and 30s. So I love that book too.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned a couple of books that I found, influential in, I don't want to put like a value judgment on them too much, but, some as books that I wanted to, that I learned something amazing from, that I wanted to emulate or, live up to, and other books that I wanted to react to. And, working in such a specific thematic space, there was a lot of stuff to look at. But I mean, I really pick up things from fiction that I want to put in photo books, that I see in cinema, that I want to see in photo books, just as much as, looking at photo books themselves.
Which, I think, which is an important lesson about how we benefit both by asking a lot of questions and also by ranging widely and pulling ideas and influences and images from lots of different sources. Because we have limited time, I want to open it up for questions now. And is there someone with a mic, or we can repeat the question? I see a hand back there. Yes. Belt it out. Oh, you don't have to belt it out.
Thank you. Hi, can you hear me? Yes. Question for Pablo. You mentioned through your experience, you're looking back to your archive, you start thinking about books that have longevity and some don't. What makes that longevity for you? What is that? If you can describe some of that.
It's, when you're doing the project, you do the best you can. And usually it's a team and designers and printers, and we are all working to get the best thing, always. And then things comes out and has a life. And why is it that some, 20 years later, they look interesting? And you go back and probably is that, the difference of what is a good book and an average book, which is a quality that is not easy to grasp, but definitely has to do with, first of all, good pictures, and then the construction of the discourse in terms of how you edit and the order that I love, because books, you see this page, and when you're looking at that, you cannot see the other page. You cannot, but you have seen, and they are behind your head, so you see them with that influence that just happened to you. So that part of the construction is very important. And then the architecture. And what I mean by that is, how heavy it is, how easy it is to see it, how all these things that, and I do like rather small books because it's much easier to, you see them from close. About your question, which are the books that you don't like? Well, I hate these coffee table books, beautiful glossy paper of nature from all over the world, that are huge and heavy, and so, I find that is contradictory. I mean, these nature photographers, using these woods. and they are corny, and they are difficult to see, and they're made to make the tables handsome.
Thank you. Another question. We're only
Yeah,
going to do two
I have
more.
I
I can't see.
have a question. This
Please.
may go to Ben, but I guess anybody could answer it. Ben, what do you think about Christopher Michael Brown's AI photos that he's made? I knew you were probably going to know that I was going to ask that question, but what do you think?
What do you think, Nelson? No, I mean, all right. Do we all know what we're talking about here?
I don't.
Okay.
Please.
So Michael Christopher Brown, I may not have like all the facts straight. Just released on Instagram a series of images around the Cuban diaspora, that were generated completely by AI. And yeah, I posted about them a little. Actually, Emily, I think you did like an interesting post about like their relationship with like photo montage or just sort of photo illustration. But I don't know. I mean, they were presented in a way that kind of annoyed me. Putting them very much sort of in dialogue with photojournalism rather than, I don't know. Maybe if he had done it in a way where like interviewing somebody who fled Cuba on a raft made out of a '57 Chevy, which I think was like one of the pictures. An image they had in their mind and then created something in it, then maybe conceptually it would have sort of more meat to it, but I don't know. I don't know.
I think this topic may come up again in the afternoon or else in the look and see in the late afternoon, and for all of us to continue talking about. I've gotten the no time left from Catherine. I thank Catherine for being the time minder. I wish you all a good lunch, and I really want to thank both Pablo and Ben.